Welcome everyone to our first session of the Design Charrette Saturday day. We are going to be going over the guilds of the Lifeboat Academy, why we use them, how they work, what they are, and how you can get involved. And before we start, I'd like to just take a moment to arrive in the space together, take a few deep breaths, and just notice how your body feels in the seat. You can close your eyes or keep them open. Just taking some breaths in a way that works for you, whatever feels supportive. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes, and we'll start with a check in question. I'll just keep it kind of simple and ask, how are you doing? How are you arriving in this space today? And the circle, as I see it, is Pam, April, Ben, and me. Over to you, Pam.
I'm glad finally, being first with you, you three is less daunting than when it's a room full of people. I'm finding myself feeling a little disappointed that others aren't here. Um, I have got a cold. I don't have to say that. Um, the I I'm glad that I'm here because I missed the whole guild process that you guys went through for a long, like, I mean, you really worked hard, and I I I knew what was happening, was not able to have the bandwidth to participate, and feel almost a bit like a cheat being able to actually be okay, get caught up on what the guilds are and what how that fits in with your vision. Um and I am very interested in knowing how it could have application for any part of my life circumstance. So that part of me feels excited and eager to learn. Uh, April, and it's kind of fun actually. I wish more people were here, but it is kind of fun. I haven't seen you for a long time, so all to myself. Anyway, April.
Thanks, Pamela. Um, I woke up this morning a little confused and disheveled and thinking, oh, well, what am I supposed to be doing today? Oh, where's my list? Oh, whatever. And gosh, I'm feeling a little tired. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute, everybody else that's going to be looking at me on the screen today is probably in somewhat the same state, a little bit tired, a little bit wiggly and squiggly around what's going on. And oh well, let's see what happens. So that's my state. Tired curiosity. And actually I'm feeling very fine right now. Thank you. Over to Ben.
Um, yeah, I kind of get a ditto there. I had homework to do before we got started today, and we were joking before you came on, Pam, about one of our mottos is that took longer than I thought it would, and it took longer than I thought it would, but I got it done, and April, you're kind of the circle last night was so um palpable and powerful, and it's got my mind thinking, and then that's uh part of that curiosity is, you start unraveling the threads, and some go this way and some go that way, and so that's part of my brain is occupied on all of these kind of potentials, and so that's where I am. I'm kind of in a good way Well, and it's generally both and I think that's part of this is it's lots of good stuff and lots of, you know, dread and uncertainty and, you know, what if kind of stuff, which is just always there. So yeah, I'm in a both and morning. Over to you, Ronnie.
I'm feeling pretty good. It's unfortunately cloudy today. I was hoping the sun from yesterday would continue, but alas, ups and downs, both and. I got up and I was like, I want pancakes before the charrette. So my mom and I made blueberry pancakes. So I'm a little bit sugared up, which is feeling kind of nice actually. I had Canada maple syrup, so I'm feeling connected to everybody. And but yeah, I'm just feeling glad to be here. So yeah, so I will go ahead and share my screen and get us going with the presentation. Can everybody see this? Awesome. All right, welcome to Guild 101 with the Lifeboat Academy. So as you may know, the Lifeboat Academy is seeking to model resilience and regeneration at the person, place, and community level. And we are talking about lifeboats. And the way that we define a lifeboat, or one of the ways, is as a personal place-based resilience network that equips people to weather whatever storms may be coming. And we're trying to create, or we are creating, the Lifeboat Network, which is a network of these smaller networks all connected together to share support and resources with one another. And one of our many mottos is we care for the land to heal the people, and we heal the people to care for the land. And so Sociocracy provides a framework for pretty much everything that we do in the Lifeboat Academy. We use many tools and processes that fall under the umbrella of Sociocracy. And basically, the whole purpose of Sociocracy is to ensure that individuals and an organization are able to thrive. They're able to collaborate effectively, move through challenges, and consistently improve, um, month after month, year after year. And so, what we're trying to do is maximize innovation and agency while also minimizing conflict. So, we want to hear from everybody. We want everybody to be included and to feel heard and to have as much creativity as possible, and also try to foresee problems before they arise and address concerns before they become full-blown conflicts. Sociocracy is principles based, and there are 7 principles that I'll be sharing in a moment that kind of provide the backbone to everything that we do. And sociocracy also can be described as a pattern language. So it's looking at the patterns of how people work best together and then providing tools that enable us to do that. So it's taking the guesswork out of how do we work together in a way that's effective. So the guilds that we have at the Lifeboat Academy, and I just want to make a note that if you look up sociocracy, they call guilds circles. It's the same thing. The guilds are circles. We just like to call them guilds because it's more fun and cool. So our 5 guilds are Heart, Work, and Philosophy, Research and Learning, Finance and Legal, Farm, Food, and Housing, and Outreach and Network. So this is just an example of how we have visually laid out the guilds and how they're connected to one another. Each of the guilds has a little circle representing it, and then we've drawn arrows to kind of represent all the interconnections between them. We don't need to go deep into detail into this. It's just a way to see, there is a way of conceptualizing your organization as an organism with interconnected parts. So the way that guilds work in the Lifeboat Academy is every year we do what we're doing this weekend at the Charrette, which is or part of the annual planning process, is we go over the driver statement for each guild. So the driver statement is going to lay out the goals and functions of the guild, how the guilds are connected with other guilds. And so that's how we delegate kind of who does what in the Lifeboat Academy. And usually the functions of each guild are pretty clear, but sometimes there's overlap and confusion. And so that's where the coordination circle comes in. And so we're going to be demonstrating this process throughout the day today. How do the guilds communicate with one another and coordinate in the coordination circle? So within each guild, there are chores and projects, and it's important to know the difference between them. So chores are regular ongoing responsibilities that help to keep the guild going. These are things that basically go on forever, unless or until the chores are updated for some reason. And then a project is typically something new. It's creating some kind of infrastructure, and it's generally time limited. So a project will last usually for a season, so 3 months or so. And it's important to keep up with the chores that kind of keep everything running in the background. Because if you get too focused on the project, you might fall behind on just kind of the everyday stuff that has to happen. So it's good for each guild to kind of maintain a balance point between those. And then each guild has specific roles for people to play. So in our guilds, each one has 1 or 2 caretakers who are basically the person who makes sure that what needs to happen in each guild happens. The caretaker is not doing all the work. I think that's a really important point. But they are kind of asking, who can do what, as well as the caretakers go to the coordination circle to report on the activities of each of the guilds. And then there's kind of a spectrum of other roles that each guild has. So there are helpers, apprentices, peers, and mentors. So anybody can choose to become a helper in a guild and start to take on 1 or 2 tasks that are fairly simple. And then if they want, they can start to take on more and learn new skills, earn new badges that will qualify them to be an apprentice, a peer, and then eventually, if they would like to, a mentor. And then there's also kind of a more subtle role of being a link. And what this means in the Lifeboat Academy specifically, we have people who are in more than one guild. And this is important because they're able to inform the guild about what's happening in another guild and make sure that we have consistent sort of fluid communication between the guilds, and each guild doesn't become like its own vacuum. I think I'm sharing the wrong presentation. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. Ben, do you have the link to the other one? I saved the wrong one in my browser.
I have it. I'm just having a difficulty with buttons, so give me
Okay.
a second here. Actually, do you want me to share, or I can?
You can share, yeah. I just don't know. We're going to have to go back in time.
Yeah.
We have several different presentations that are similar, but not exactly the one that we wanted for today. So sorry about that.
There. I think the link is in the chat.
Okay. Okay, yeah, we skipped all the sociocracy stuff. So I'm gonna backtrack, and I'm sorry if this is confusing, and no worries if so. Well, what do you think, Ben? Should I keep talking about the guilds and then talk about sociocracy?
I think the only slide that is new in there is the 7 principles.
Okay, you're right.
So I think just cover the principles and then skip up ahead.
Okay, cool. Let's try again. All right, 7 principles of sociocracy, which I said I would go over, and now I'm going over. Um, so these are the principles that we use to kind of guide our work and make sure that we are staying on track with how we want to be together and the culture that we're trying to create. So one of the most important ones, in my opinion, is consent. So everybody in the room, everybody in the organization is included in decisions that affect them. So we try and raise and seek out objections before we make decisions to avoid conflict down the line and just make sure that everybody feels heard and everybody can live with a decision that is made. Another important one is accountability. So we make commitments to take on certain things. And then if something comes up and somebody's not able to hold their commitment, we ask that they take responsibility and speak up about it. And then we can work together to figure out a different solution. Um, Equivalence, I actually already talked about with in terms of consent, but involving people in making decisions that affect them. Transparency is we really try and record as much as possible and make it available to the public. So if you go on our YouTube channel, you can see pretty much every meeting we've had over the last, I think, 2 years or so has been recorded. So there's nothing that we do really behind closed doors. And we want everything to be available. And that includes our documents too. So if you wanted to access something that is in our Google Drive, we could give you permission to view that. We try to continuously improve what we're doing. So we use a process called Aim, Act, Reflect, where we set a goal, we do what we think is going to help us reach that goal, and then we stop and reflect on how it went. And that helps us to incrementally change what we're doing and accelerate our learning to do better in the future. We also value effectiveness, so we devote time to what is going to bring us closer to achieving our goals. And one of the kind of shorthand ways we talk about that is what's the 20 that gets us 80. So what's the 20% amount of work or effort that will get us 80% of the desired outcome? And then empiricism. So we test our assumptions through experimentation and see, if there's a question that we have, can we test that? If so, how are we going to do that? And we can set up experiments to actually see if that's true or not. So those are the 7 principles. And thank you for bearing with us as I redirected us to that. And I will just go through, we already covered a lot of this. All right, so I kind of briefly mentioned badges in each guild representing the skills that are assigned to that guild's functions. And this is not yet something we have in place at the moment, but it is a proposed experiment that we've been talking about for a really long time, and we would like to eventually put into practice. And so the way that you would earn a badge in a guild is you would shadow a member of the guild doing a specific skill. It could be on the farm, it could be something that's online, related to putting the newsletter together or social media or something like that. And then the person who taught you that skill will shadow you doing that skill. And then you will perform that skill yourself 3 times and have your teacher check that you did it correctly. And then after that, you earn your badge and you are able to show other people how to do that skill. So we're going to be going into badges a little bit more later. But yeah, that's kind of the main overview for now. And earlier when I was talking about the principles of sociocracy, I mentioned the aim, act, reflect process. So, what that provides is kind of a fractal way of planning. So, every year we have the design charrette and we start with an annual plan. So, what's the high level of what we're trying to do? What's our North Star for the year and in general? So, not just this year, but overall. And then the annual plan gets broken down into a seasonal plan for each guild. So, each guild is going to be proposing their priority projects for the year. And so then all those plans get broken into seasonal plans, so kind of 3 month sections. And then the seasonal plans get broken down into what we call a sprint. So a sprint is typically a 2 week period, and we'll get together at the beginning of the sprint. When we meet in the coordination circle, that's essentially what we're doing and saying, what are we going to be up to for the next 2 weeks? What's each guild doing? Who's doing what? Making sure we have all our bases covered. So that 2 week sprint will be feeding in back into the seasonal plan, and the seasonal plan will feed back into the annual plan for the next year. So it's kind of this cyclical process. We're consistently stopping to reflect on where are we now, what are we trying to do, what's working well, what's not working, and adjusting our planning as needed. So a really important piece of all of this and kind of an energy that we are cultivating is balancing the energy, balancing the flows of energy throughout the organization. And part of how we do that is through voluntary agreements. So everybody in the guilds, all of our agreements that we make, all of our commitments that we make are voluntary. We are all about being consent based. We are not coercive. Anything you agree to, you are agreeing because you want to make that agreement. And with that said, as I mentioned before, we ask that people be accountable and we hold each other and ourselves accountable to those agreements. So if you're not able to keep an agreement, it's okay. You didn't fail. You're not a bad person. We just need to know ahead of time to make sure whatever you agreed to still gets done. And then the third piece of this is reciprocity. So thinking about ways that we benefit from the work here at the Lifeboat Academy, and then ways that we can also contribute to the work that's going on. And participating in guilds is one way to do that. So the guilds are, we're all helping keep this thing running, and we're all also benefiting at the same time. And just a note about guild participation is it's not meant to be a drag. It's not meant to be grunt work. It's really an opportunity to learn these processes for effective collaboration. And as a guild member for 2 years now, I can say I have learned so much by participating in guild meetings and learning how we navigate the annual planning process, how we navigate tensions. There's so much hands-on learning that's part of the guilds that people can take and use elsewhere. So now I'm going to go a little bit more deeply into each of the guilds and what their purposes are, what their functions are. And all of these descriptions come directly from the guild driver statements. So these are the documents that we have that outline what each guild is supposed to be doing. And so that's why we've included all this information here. So the Heartwork and Philosophy Guild, it's kind of in the title, it acts as the emotional heart of the organization. And they're thinking about ways that we can develop deeper relationships with each other, as well as with ourselves and with all our relations on the farm, on the land, in the communities where we live. And heart work and philosophy is really thinking about how we work together. What are the values that we hold? What are the agreements that we make to each other in every space that we enter together? How can we show up to be our best selves every time we meet? And so Heart Work runs the agreement circles, which are a new kind of circle that we created in the past year. Um, and so yeah, heart work is really trying to keep our hearts in the work to support what we're offering to be healthy and supportive and wholesome. So we have a sort of new guild that kind of was the Principles and Governance Guild that has now morphed into Research and Learning. Our shorthand for it is the Curiosity Guild because it sounds cool and fun. But the Curiosity Guild acts as the immune system of the Lifeboat Academy. So thinking about how do we effectively onboard people, how do we communicate what it is that we're doing, what we're offering in a way that makes sense to people. How are we using processes to ensure fair and effective decision making? So research and learning is very into the sociocratic process, navigating tensions. How do we use tools to deal with what's what's at stake, what's on our plate, as well as thinking about how we might use restorative practices like navigating tensions to address any internal conflicts. Like I mentioned, they do onboarding. They're constantly testing better ways of doing things, thinking about how do we get more people involved who can benefit from the work we're doing here. And the Curiosity Guild is kind of one of our helper guilds that plays a supportive role in helping other guilds run experiments based on what their goals are for the year. And so, like I've mentioned, we treat everything as an experiment, which means all guilds are constantly running small experiments and can get support from the Curiosity Guild to do that. The Finance and Legal Guild is kind of the brains of the organism, taking care of all of the kind of devilish details around purchasing the property at Spalding Valley Farm, fundraising, thinking about kind of the structure for investments for stakeholders in the organization, all of the really nitty gritty stuff that often takes longer than you think it will. So we're very grateful for finance and legal. I feel like I covered that stuff. So we'll kind of have an update a little bit later about kind of what's been going on with the finance and legal. So I won't say too much now. And then farm, food, and housing. Again, it's kind of obvious from the name of the guild, but they're the muscles and bones of the organization. They're thinking about how to care for and provide for the physical needs of the land and everybody on the land. So food, shelter, water, energy, as well as kind of the woofers, the volunteers, people who are also wanting to come and help out with all of those things. So the on the ground work on the farm or at the farmistry, as we've been calling it, is both really grounded in experience and experiments through time and also guided by theory. So thinking about and being curious about what other people are doing and then applying, running experiments to see what works. The farmistry is really trying to be an embodiment of resilience and generation, kind of an example where people can come and really experience what we're talking about when we talk about building a lifeboat. And yeah, so I like saying farmistry because I think it's a really powerful idea. And last but not least, the Outreach and Network Guild is kind of the tentacles or the mycelia that reach out from the Lifeboat Academy into the world to build relationships, connect with other organizations who are doing similar work or perhaps different work, but where there could be mutual benefit. So we're thinking about how we manage those connections. There's also potential for working on reconciliation between communities and kind of navigating conflict as it comes up. And outreach and network is really managing communication. So not just person to person relationships, but also our social media presence, putting out content that piques people's interest to get involved in the Lifeboat Academy. And just, yeah, kind of recruiting folks who might have an interest in what we're doing, and then seeing what they might be interested in, what guilds they might wish to get involved in as they join. So if you're interested in joining a guild, you can go to this form, and I'm trying to copy the form and it's not letting me copy it. But let us know if you want the form and we can send it to you. It's just a series of questions asking what you might be interested in. And if you join a guild, you're not committing to anything specific. You're not even committing to coming to all the meetings. It's really just saying, I'm interested. I'd like to learn more. You could come to a meeting or two and see if it feels like a good fit. So we really welcome different levels of engagement. It's perfectly normal to show up at a guild meeting and not understand what's going on. That's totally okay. That's totally normal. And we're here to provide support and answer questions. But you're here at the Charrette, which is a really great way to get to know the guilds more intimately, kind of all at once, and see what you might be interested in. So with that is our presentation. And Ben put the form in the chat. So if you'd like to get involved, you can. You could also just let us know today what you might be interested in. Yeah, so now the floor is open for questions, comments, concerns, any of the above. We're the Lifeboat Academy and we're here to help.
I will start off with a comment. I think, Ronnie, you did a great job.
Thank you.
It was very clear and yeah, well done. Or it was clear to me, at least. So knowing what we're trying to communicate, I felt like it was communicated well.
In regard to that, I would like to offer a token to Ronnie, which is a smaller form of a badge to indicate that you've noticed something that somebody is doing that moves things forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you communicated that very well, Ronnie. And what I appreciate about it, what the guilds are addressing, is that the full range of the human being, of who we are, what we're doing, what our context is, the head, the heart, the body, and the comprehensiveness of it, the logic of it is so sound and persuasive. And I think the next level of exploration for me would be to kind of have a for example of how it is. Like, I know the outreach network was active in engaging my interest, catching my attention, engaging my interest, and drawing me in. And so with each of those, it's just interesting to think of other ways in which they can be acted out within the context that one is sort of living in, of how you actually do that, because it feels invisible to me. It just sort of happens, and yet in fact it's by design.
I think that's it is one of the hardest things to communicate about this way of working, is that it is process and content, that it's not one or the other. It's both integrated, and it's a little bit, you can't step in the same river twice, which makes it a bit challenging because people are always coming in the middle of something. And there's a desire to kind of have the snapshot, at the moment, this is how things are, and communicating the snapshot, here's how things are, with a little bit of how we got here and where we're going. So so a lot of this is, and Ronnie said, sociocracy is a pattern language in that it's trying to look at making visible what is invisible but still there. And so I would say one of the more challenging things of introducing modernized, colonized people into the process is that the getting comfortable with discomfort, getting comfortable with the idea that nothing has a fixed boundary. Like even the guilds, and that's part of what we'll go over at 10:30, is we established the guilds. We kind of had the idea of guilds 2 years ago, 3 years ago, no, 3 or 4 years ago. And we were kind of tipping our toe in the water of the guilds. And then there was some formalization that happened at our first charrette 3 years ago, 2 years ago. And then last year, we really kind of did an all-in organizing ourselves around the guilds. And in the space of this year, through actually working on it, when we established the guilds, it was very confusing. There was so much overlap, and it was really hard to well, this could be here and it could be there. And, this part of it makes sense here and this part of it makes sense there. And we just sort of stumbled through it. But in that constant experimentation, what do we try? So what's good enough for now, safe enough to try? And in the space of this year, and actually in the space of, I'd say, the first four months last year, the clarity that came around how the guilds worked, there was a moment where I think we all collectively had oh, okay. And it was where the part was clear and where the part was fuzzy. It wasn't like the fuzziness went away, but there's a core here that's clear, and there's a core here that's clear, and there's a bit here that's fuzzy. And that just made it so much more workable, because we could kind of name, oh, here's the fuzzy bit. And when we get into that fuzzy bit, well, let's talk about that. So anyhow, I think that's a very long-winded way of saying you kind of have to relax into the process, and you have to be okay with it, being an ongoing thing. And there's a lot of pushback from people that tell me how it works and tell me what I should do. And I think that's the big thing, is people want to be told, it's that old idea of command control. So breaking that habit is a bit of the challenge. But the actual, and one of our mottos is learning to unlearn to relearn. And when you let go of that desire for it to be, top-down, clearly defined silos, with a hierarchy of who gets to make the decision and who's just a worker bee, when you let go, it's hard to let go of that. When you let go of that, the actual working of it is really comfortable. It's surprisingly humane and comfortable, and we now consistently, I think, have meetings where we're surprised at how much we got done, how quickly, where really big, complicated ideas come into a practical, this is what we're going to do next week, in a surprisingly quick amount of time. That's my ramble off to so I will mute myself now.
I just wanted to comment a bit about what this feels like working within this system. And certainly, I mean, this is almost entirely experiential, but it is based on theory. And having people understand that is part of the challenge as well. And in that kind of working, for me, there's a joyousness about it that kind of bubbles up, as well as a great deal of uncertainty. And I've worked with living systems for years and with these series for years, but seeing it in practice and understanding where the complexity, the levels of complexity kind of rub up against one another. And that's where the uncertainty for me happens. And the realizations around all of this only come over time. It's like ebb and flow. It's like any natural process, I think. And it's kind of exhilarating to be part of that. There is a surrender that's involved, which Ben just talked about in terms of hierarchy and who gets told to do what and who takes responsibility for what. But it's a system, I believe, of people working together where both your character and your skills come out. And navigating both those areas for me is something that keeps me on my toes, I think. Anyway, I love it as a vast lived experience.
Yeah, it's very different from the business as usual kind of meeting. And I think there are people who come to it, when a lot of people think of meetings, they think of being bored. They think of there's way too much to get done in an hour. They think of one person leading the meeting who's really annoying to listen to. It's like there's all of these features of the business as usual world that just kind of wear you down over time. But so many, I mean, most meetings that we have, I walk away feeling energized and proud of what we did and kind of surprised, kind of what Ben was talking about. Like, wow, we entered this meeting with a really big question or three really big questions that just felt kind of impossible. And then through the process of circle and the wisdom of the circle, we arrive at something that surprisingly touches each of those questions and gives us a plan for moving forward. And so there's also that we're tapping into the wisdom of each other and this very ancient process of what happens when we all get a chance to share. Even the person who's been in the project for 10 years and the person who's been in for a week, your input is still valued. And the only other thing I would say about getting to know a guild is it's building a relationship. It's like any relationship that you build with a person in your life. It's like you come to a meeting. I don't really know what this is. I'm kind of confused, but I also kind of like it. Come to another meeting, and over time, the processes that we use start to become more clear. And the things you might be interested in that guild start to become more clear. So I like to tell the story of how when I first arrived at the farm and started learning about all of these processes, I was confused for weeks and I just kept asking questions and being like, is this thing that you know? That's this other thing. Okay. So it took me a long time to eventually understand, and I'm still understanding. Like I'm still learning about sociocracy. So yeah, it's all relationship.
And to that extent, and I remember early on, Ronnie, how you were more in the background when I first popped into the lifeboat, and then how you grew like a tree, and it was quite a marvelous thing. And that metaphor of living processes, it seems to me what is being described here maps onto living processes of how an ecosystem organizes itself as a community of all these exchanging energies. And I've never quite got that sense of it before, but it seems more visible to me now, more palpable.
Yeah, and I think there's Ronnie was talking of it's not just the confusion of when you come in, partly I think Ronnie's confusion was longer than a new person coming in now would have been, because we were still figuring out how to do it, how to communicate it. and there is a fractal nature to it. So, so I think April made a really good point about the theory and practice. It is, and so when we talk about both and, there is a yin and yang, there is an in and out, there is an ebb and flow, there is, and there are at the high level, like I would say at the highest level, um, the entire theory behind what we're doing is karma plus experiment, right? So it is do less of what doesn't work and do more of what does work. And when you're unsure, run an experiment. And that's it. And now how do you do that? Right. And then that looks different when what's working and isn't working is in a meeting versus what's working and isn't working is on a farm versus in my head. But the same principles apply all you know at all levels of the fractal. It's still the same principles. And and in that spirit, that's also one of the things that's becoming really clear to me is it's sociocracy plus circle process. And they do two different things that are complementary. Sociocracy gives you a structure and a channel, but it does not give you the sense-making ability.
Yeah.
The sense-making, the integration, the knowing, understanding comes from the circle. And then the understanding gets channeled into the sociocratic process into action. So sort of the sense-making theorizing part is circle process. And then the experimentation of putting that theory into practice is channeled through the sociocratic process, which then leads you back to the reflection, which is, back into that sense making. And so you need both halves of them. And I think that a lot of the both and, the power of the both and is, well, and it was Ruth talking last night about curiosity. All of this is fueled by, it's the difference between having problems to solve and having challenges to play with. And that reframing, it takes and that's also where the social support comes in, because oftentimes it'll feel very personally like a problem. And when you start to talk about it with other people, all of a sudden it can get morphed into, oh, isn't this interesting? Look at these complex dynamics. Wow, this is a head scratcher, and it sort of allows, it's like the emotional blocks, the resistance, the fear, the anxiety, all that stuff that we talked about. That's the process killer. And so it's the having the relationships where, like Ronnie, you said it last night, knowing everyone's got my back. No one here is gunning for me. Everyone here wants what I want in general. And so cool. Now that all of a sudden it just opens up.
It's interesting how much of what I'm hearing I have heard iterations of before. But because I'm in a real life context where these things are playing out, these various dynamics are playing out, and projects are involved, and actual people are involved. Everything is. Uh, I love repetition for one thing because I have a hard time retaining stuff, but also what a difference it makes when it lands into a lived context, experience and context. And suddenly it's like, oh, right, yes, okay. But and then for me, I'm about to say but, right, instead of and. How do I do this in a context where no one else is participating in the process? I'm just going to leave it at that. But uh, it leaves me hungry.
I guess the flippant answer, Pamela, is to say join us. for the process and for this and for the struggle that we do collectively. For me, that brings up another really important point about why I'm involved with this, and it's the non-coerciveness of this. There's a lot of, I mean, there's power dynamics all the time, but we manage them in a way that is passing power back and forth and being, there's an inbuilt equity, I think, to this. And it teaches us all how to get progress and to notice what's going on around us without having to resort to aggression or coercion as a way to get our needs filled. So there's an automatic lower level of filling up of needs that helps us to balance emotionally. And finding systems that create non-coerciveness has been a big part of my life work, actually. Violence prevention is one of the big areas that I've been drawn into. And what I'm finding here with the guild system and the other systems is that it reinforces non-coerciveness, but gets the best out of folks, even if we're confused a fair amount of the time. But certainly, I mean, in my world, I've been looking for non-coercive settings forever. And here we almost kind of grow it. And that makes it, in a way, safe to be involved because collective groups can be self-serving and cults can happen without anybody meaning them to. And I've been really wary of that kind of stuff. Well, this is the opposite, I believe now.
Especially because we joke so much about being a cult. That's how you know we're not a cult. So, yeah.
Now drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. Big agree there. And the flip side to the non-coercion and the safety is the accountability piece and people having to take responsibility because they don't have a supervisor. They don't have someone overseeing everything they're doing. It's up to each of us to say, here's what I got done, here's what I need help with, here's what I'm not able to do. And some people just aren't used to that. And having that be, being okay with not being perfect is a big piece of it. So, yeah.
Well, and I think there's also, so, and Pam, you were talking about the how do you, when you don't have buy-in ahead of time. And so part of the Lifeboat Academy is how do we support each other in guerrilla work in those other settings? And the good news is because we are working with what is, you don't have to force anything, right? It can be frustrating because there are going to be dynamics that are part of what is. And but the more that you can bring that lens of, okay, what's really going on here and what's really needed here, then that having that toolkit is, it's kind of like you've got your little Rolodex of what's something I can try here, and that experimental approach as well. It's like, what's some little thing I can try here that will shift, that I think may have some chance of shifting in that direction. And a lot of times what I have found is there is something people, like Ronnie was talking about business as usual meetings. People hate meetings and they hate committees, and for good reason. And they hate being on teams because they've been hurt and wounded in so many different ways. So a lot of it is just the patience of, presenting an alternative and waiting for people to take you up on that alternative. And that's why we keep focusing on it. It's, you can't, one of our mottos here is show, don't tell. I am more and more convinced there is no way we can put into words what we are actually talking about that will make sense to people who've never experienced it. It's kind of impossible. And if you're trapped in the business as usual world, you can't even hear the words that we need to use to describe what we're doing. But the minute you give people a taste of it, and they actually experience what it's like to work in a non-coercive, collaborative place where the big thing is where you're actually invited to show up just who you are, all of you, your fears, your past traumas, your current hopes. That is so transformative, just to be in those spaces. And they're human spaces, right? You don't have to fake it. You just have to kind of create that experience for people to show up, and they do. And then the other part to that is, and this is something I'm still working through learning, it's not for everyone. Everyone's in a different place in the landscape. Some people can't work this way. And, Godspeed and good luck, but not here, you know? And I think that accountability part, another one of our sayings is gentle discipline, which is we create a lot of space for people to show up, to express themselves, to take part. And you have to balance that with some healthy boundaries around, and you can't dump and run, and you can't project your things onto other people, and you can't expect other people to do your work for you. That's not going to happen. If you want this to happen, you need to make it happen. And being able to be kind of clear on that, another one of our sayings is sometimes compassion is a hug and sometimes it's a kick in the ass. And, being able to say to people, what you're using Einsteinian insanity here, where you keep wanting to do the same thing and expect a different result from it. And guess what? That's not how it works. Actions have consequences. I'm not responsible for the consequences. I don't create karma. I just respond to it. So there is that's part of the both and, is that there is a resolve, a firmness that comes with creating the opportunity as well. And that's why, again, Lifeboat Academy is so that we can, those of us that are out there on the front line dealing with all the business as usual people can have a place where we can regroup and say, what would you do in this situation? Or I feel so frustrated that I'm pounding my head against the wall with this person. I'm like, yep, and it's not you. Or, this part is yours to, this is your part here, and that's their part. And, let go of their part. That's got nothing to do with you. Here's what you could try.
Well, there's much that has been said that I kind of have an eagerness to respond to, and I'm also aware, Heather, that you've been in the room, and I'm really be interested in knowing. I don't want to put the spotlight on you and make you uncomfortable, but before I say something yet again, have you anything? How has it been landing for you?
I'm entering it and just I'm curious about myself, I guess. And interesting about curiosity at our co-op, for we have a tradition, I guess you call it, every year at the end of the year, we have 2 cauldrons. And we pick from one cauldron something we are letting go of. So in 2024, I let go of. And then in the other, and we've got a little fire and we burn it. And on the other one, we pick, I'm bringing to the light for 2025. And there's a person who I dearly love in the co-op, David Ketzel, who he picks something and he looks at it and he doesn't like it. It doesn't fit with him. It doesn't resonate with him. It doesn't no. So he puts it back in. And he keeps picking out of the cauldron something that he actually can relate to. And the same goes with what he wants to bring to the light. And I said, David, no, that's not the point. The universe is telling you something that you need to learn from, right? So I pick from the one cauldron what I'm letting go of, and I have to keep that. Somehow I have to figure out why am I picking that. Um, so I picked I'm letting go of vagueness. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, I particularly I feel as I age is that things become sometimes more vague or like they're cataracts or something that I'm trying to see through that need to be removed. And then what I picked is that I am in 2025, I'm bringing curiosity to the light. So that was so interesting when you're talking, Ben, about curiosity. And yeah, and I'm just here for things to be revealed, I think, in a way. And just to say that there's not a right or wrong way of doing it. David's way of doing it is David's way of doing it. And I'm choosing to do it in a different way. And yeah, so I'm sitting listening, deeply listening, and I'm the kind of person that has, I know, always had something to say about everything. So last night, I mean, I just wanted to talk about everything that people were talking about. And the exercise for me is to listen. And fear comes up sometimes with me for listening. What am I going to say? I don't have anything to say. I have to summarize this. And just letting go and listening, and trusting in whatever I say, just like you invited me to say. I mean, I was listening to all of you and I was laid out a really rough night last night. So I'm just really entering into it. So it's kind of like, I'm really curious about that, you know, and I think that's certainly good enough for now. One thing on another point is, and Ben knows this because he's with another group with me in terms of practicing or sociocracy. There is that kind of really vagueness or that kind of struggling with it. And Ben has been very helpful with us in helping us to navigate a new way of meeting together, of making decisions together. And it's still really new to me. It's still a bit confusing and vague. Yeah. And everyone I work with, resistance and fear, so much fear I've experienced in the last year, in the last week. People are so frightened of the world situation. And my daughter is 52, and it's the first time I've ever hung up on her. And we didn't have to process it. I just know that she is so hurting and so confused. She was beginning to turn it on me. It's kind of like, wake up, mother, you know, you don't know, you find out what's fucking going on. It's really horrible. This, and this. And she's tracked it all. She's obsessed with all the things that Trump can do, is doing, will do, how it's going to affecting us. You know, I mean, and to be in that space with her without being overwhelmed by her is my process. So, and she's not the only one. Yeah.
I love the
I'm
way you named. Oh, sorry, Heather. You can.
no, I'm good. I was going to say, yeah.
I just really appreciate your naming that challenge because, and what I'm specifically referring to is the challenge of holding oneself in for want of a better word, right relation to the moment, whatever it happens to be, whether it's a conversation about something political or uh, and how and my context, there's a dynamic that's currently playing out in the co-op where I was just teetering on the edge of amplifying a conflict. And I feel like just being with the Lifeboat Academy in the last couple of days I felt like I've been reeled back into a place inside myself where I can stand in a much better relationship with regard to this, and how um, important it is. Well, how it happened much more deeply and quickly in the context of sharing with other people than it did in my ruminating and trying to squirrel it through my own brain.
Yeah.
And then hearing you talk about it in this other context, continually having to come back to what is mine in this situation, how can I show up in this situation to ensure that um, at the minimum no harm is done. Maybe something regenerative can take place, but to try not to feed into something degenerative, not easy to do.
Yeah.
And I feel that as a culture, we have been infantilized to be reactive and let it all hang out, and uh, celebrating hyper emotionality. And um, so there's a lot of unlearning,
Mhm.
that human beings aren't innately kind of like our culture is savage in that regard. Um, and regaining my humanity is a matter of um, um, well, you get my drift. I don't have to try to find all the right words. Anyway, I really appreciate what you brought in there.
Yeah, and that resonate. One of the ways we talk about the Lifeboat Academy is as like a halfway house to recover from late stage modernity, capitalism, colonization. And for me, I feel like it's a useful story that we all are brain damaged, right? We all are um, healing from what is essentially addictive behavior, that infantilization. And I think we've been trained to seek, there's a great saying of, you can never have enough of what you don't need in the first place. And our basic needs, our real needs, have been stripped away, and then these false alternatives put in place. You know, the sense of safety that comes from being in control rather than sense of safety of being in your tribe. You know, just because you're in your tribe doesn't mean the world is suddenly going to be safe, but you're going to be okay no matter what happens. But we don't get that. Instead, we get, if you're rich enough and powerful enough and in control enough, you can protect yourself. And the projection that we've also been, the problem is out there, right? Well, it's either in here or out there. And without this understanding of, relationality. And I can't, like, one of the things that Roland and I are, individually, we've both been conditioned to be givers and problem solvers, and so being compassionate always involved self-abnegation, right? Understanding somebody else who's acting out and pushing down my needs and pretending like I don't actually have needs or I don't deserve to have my needs met. And so one of the things for us is you can't be compassionate to somebody else at the expense of yourself. The overall level of compassion in the world is like an equation. that, you know, it needs to be equal parts self-compassion and other compassion. You know, you can't burn yourself down in the spirit of being compassionate to others and actually grow compassion in the world. And anyhow, I think that's all by way of saying we're living in crazy times. And that's, you know, Ronnie was talking about the pharmastery, and I think we need pharmasteries. I think we need enclaves where people can remove themselves from late stage capitalism and the constant microaggressions and macroaggressions that we're all subject to long enough to catch our breath. And in part, you know, these kind of online spaces, we can create little bubbles. But we need to have physical bubbles where you can actually see how this manifests, you know, in the health of everything, not just in the health of our talking points. So anyhow, I'm also noticing that we are a little bit past how much time we wanted to spend here, but this conversation has been really great. And but I also want to make sure that we're set up well so we can take a break and come back in 15 minutes at 10:30. So I guess last thoughts for the good of the cause. Ronnie? Anybody? You're muted.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening to our guild spiel, which sounds like that whole phrase sounds like Yiddish to me, or German. Gildespiel. Anyway.
Oh, thank you for all your hard work over the last year in building such a marvelously shape-shifting structure. It's wonderful.
I love the shape-shifting structure term.
Yeah.
That pretty much describes the way I feel about this. Thanks.
Are there any last thoughts?
Nope, just I'm looking forward to coffee. I haven't yet.
Me too.
It's have you very, very early in the morning, so for me to sleep in has been an amazing thing.
Well then,
So
I guess
did you say that in 15 minutes or
10:30 is when we'll start the actual proposals.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So yeah, closer to 12 minutes from now. So take a break, and Ronnie, you're still muted.
I'm usually so Zoom savvy. I'm just going to turn my camera off, but stay in the meeting. So,
Cool.
yeah.
That's a good idea. See y'all soon.